This podcast is part of the Midwest Podcast Network. Find out more about our other shows and how to support our network at midwestpodcastnetwork.com. You are now tuned in to Westworld FM, a podcast about HBO's Westworld. My name is Alex.
My name is Nick.
And I'm John.
Today we will be discussing the entirety of HBO's Westworld TV series through Season 2, as well as some of your feedback. We will be spoiling everything through Season 2, Episode 10 of the series, so please pause and go catch up if you're not current on the show. You can find more episodes of our podcast at westworld.fm. We're also Westworld FM on Twitter, and you can send feedback to westworldfm@gmail.com to tell us what you think of our show and share your thoughts on HBO's Westworld so we can read them on our show. Send us corrections, observations, or anything regarding Westworld or our podcast. If you enjoy this show or any other show on the Midwest Podcast Network, please consider heading over to patreon.com/MidwestPodNet and pledge as little as $1 a month to help us make our network even better. Special thanks to Jason K., who is pledged at the level of $10 per month. And since this is the last episode of Westworld FM for this season, we might as well just go through real quick. We do have a show called Gone to Texas. It is a recap podcast for AMC's Preacher. Please go check that out if you're into Preacher, or if you're looking for something to watch in the 2 years that Westworld probably won't be on the air. It might be a good time to catch up on some Preacher. We also did a recap podcast for a TV show called The Alienist that was on FX. It's based on a book by Caleb Carr, and that was one season. It was a one and done, but we do have a podcast outlining every episode of it, so please go check that out at thealienist.tv. Our friends over at Horror Movie Yearbook talk about horror movies about every other week. They did an awesome King of Kings Stephen King adaptation bracket, which was quite a great episode. You can go check that out at horrormovieyearbook.com. And then John and I, and sometimes Nick, talk about video games on a show called the Midwest Game Nerds Podcast. Please check that out at midwestgamenerds.com. Find links to all that stuff at midwestpodcastnetwork.com. And find a link to give us money at patreon.com/midwestpodnet. So, here we are. This is our Season 2 wrap-up of Westworld FM. We did get a review on iTunes that I wanted to talk through. It says, "Do yourself a favor and subscribe," by Zalberlinda, someone who I think came to us in the Alienist show and left a nice review there. But she says, "Alex, John, and Nick, another 5-star podcast. It's so comfortable listening to these three friends' thoughtful, funny, and sometimes spirited ideas and opinions on each episode of this unique show. I listened to 3 other Westworld podcasts, but when I found yours, I knew I would love it. You guys bring something special to podcasts. Thanks, and keep up the great work."
Oh, awesome.
Thank you, Zalberlinda.
Yes, thank you.
All true.
Yeah.
Well done. Thank you.
You recognized.
That's I really love hearing the people that have come over from the Alienist.
Yeah.
I feel like that was our strangest podcast.
It was pretty, but it was interesting.
But one of my favorites.
And I think it's honestly one of the most successful if you go on like a per episode basis, essentially.
It was a lot of fun.
And that was a very unique show, as like just the show itself, not even our podcast. So if you are looking for something to do in the off season, check out The Alienist.
Yeah, I almost want to go back and rewatch it now.
Yeah.
Just knowing that it's a one and done is so different than everything else we've ever talked about.
Oh yeah.
Because video games, they go on as long as you want them to,
Mm-hmm.
and movies, same thing. And then these other series, they have a tendency to just go and go and go until they run out of steam. But The Alienist, it was like we saw the finish line when we started.
Yep.
And it made it really interesting.
Yeah, it absolutely did. We do have a friend on Facebook. His name's Jeremy. He had some great ideas. A lot of them are quite long, so I think you should go check out some of his comments on our posts on Facebook. That's facebook.com/westworldfm. He did take a little issue after episode 9 with my thought on how the hats collecting the data on the guests was. I thought that was stupid, and he kind of points out that they are, there are things that point to it previously in this season. The fact that Carl Strand says, "I want everything, even the last Stetson," off of the hosts. I don't know what the hosts are doing and why they would need the scanners, but he seemed concerned with collecting the hats. So I get that there were things pointing to that in the season. I just still think it was a stupid answer to a question we weren't asking.
I think that's fair because it puts a lot of technology in the hat too. I mean,
Yeah.
if the idea is that the hats are reading your mind, which is, I don't know. I think we reached the point in the series where I reached that valley and kind of looked into it and was like, I don't know. This might be where it ends for me. Like, I don't know if I could buy anymore. But if the hat's doing that, but it's also storing the data, that counts on you retrieving that hat at the end of someone's Westworld journey.
Unless it's like wirelessly transmitting through the mesh network or something.
But then why do you need them?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's an awesome observation that Strand said that.
Yeah.
And I think that if you went back and like someone on Reddit captured the screenshot that in the facility where they were collecting the guest data, the hats were there.
Yep.
That's neat that those details were sprinkled throughout there. But at the same time, the likelihood of recovering the hats all the time, unless for them it's just a numbers game. Like, okay, we're only going to get X amount of hats, and of those hats, only so many are going to have information that's useful. But over 30 years, maybe you can draw, enough conclusions and get enough data to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it just. I was already in.
Yeah.
You didn't need to give me another thing that could throw me from the carton, like it didn't need to that was just information that I wasn't seeking, and the fact that they felt the need to give it to us in that way just felt kind of ham-fisted and a little
sometimes
stupid.
the logistics of some of these mechanics in sci-fi movies and TV, as soon as you start asking questions like that, like, well, how are they getting it? Then you're kind of ruining it for yourself.
It's begging you to lose your suspension of disbelief.
Right.
In a show that requires a lot of that.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's kind of that way with a lot of genre fiction in general.
Yeah.
Like somebody in our Discord was just praising A Quiet Place.
Yeah.
And I remember after I saw it, I was like, wow, that was a really good movie. And then I spent the rest of the day thinking about it, and suddenly I didn't like it as much anymore. And the more and more I kept thinking about it, the more and more I was like, wait, this movie doesn't make any sense. And then I was like, well, I'm ruining it for myself by instead of just enjoying the movie and like accepting it for what it is, the more you start to dissect stuff like that, sometimes you can just end up unraveling it for yourself.
Yeah.
And ruining the experience.
Yeah.
So if they had just said, hey, we've been collecting guest data, I would have been like, whoa, that's crazy, instead of saying, wait a minute.
And that's totally what I said earlier in the season. There was no part of me that was like, how are they doing that? I was like, oh, we talked about how Hector might have been recording the conversation between Cullen and Hale in season 1.
Yeah.
And so all the pieces I felt were there for me. I didn't need that answer, and it just trying to ground your hard science fiction in hats. It's begging me to pull at threads that I don't need to pull at.
I hope they blame a lot more stuff in the show on the hats. And we keep seeing Ed Harris do that little.
Yeah, the hat tip.
Oh, oh, oh.
He's picking up hats at the Lids store in Oakland Mall, and he's like, "Is that you, Ford?"
Oh my god!
Fuck you, Robert.
Lids is my favorite store in that mall. Whenever I walk by it, I'm just like, man, look at that.
I don't even know if it's there anymore.
That's probably. I don't even know if the mall's there anymore. To be honest, like, who knows?
You haven't been inside, so
we
who knows?
We should make it a point for our social media to go and take a picture of Lids.
And Photoshop Ed Harris in
put
front
him
of
in
it.
there. And just a whole row of Stetsons. And Ford standing behind the counter.
Yes, please. All right. So basically what I wanted to do, I wanted to talk about our general thoughts on the season. It's been about 2 weeks now since the season finale. We can kind of just dissect how we felt about it, how we've been thinking about it, what our lingering thoughts on the season are, kind of the things that did work for us, the things that didn't work for us, and then we can kind of get into a little bit of where we think season 3 might go, where we hope it goes, where we don't want it to go, that kind of thing. So, as far as general thoughts this season, I personally don't think I got a season of Westworld that I wanted, but I'm okay with that. I think the fact that season 2 took steps in newer directions and didn't go the way that I expected it to / wanted to, is ultimately makes me respect the show more on the whole rather than really appreciate what season 2 did for the show. I have problems with it, which I will get into, but I can't help but feel a little disappointed after the end of this season because it just felt like it was missing some of the stuff that I really appreciated out of season 1. But I can get more into that in a minute. John, have you had time to ruminate on your thoughts for this season?
I was trying to do a full rewatch of the whole series, and I got about 7 episodes in on season 1.
Yeah.
And I think, like, I really liked this season. If anything, it has compelled me to go back and rewatch. Yeah. And the rewatching has proven to be pretty interesting. Some of the little things that I've been able to pick out, which, again, my retention is going to be terrible, so I won't be able to tell you all of them, but maybe 1 or 2 of the things that I've picked out. But I think overall, I like the darker tone of this season.
Yeah.
I know I gave the show a lot of shit about Dolores early on and just not caring about her story arc. And
you mean in season 2?
Yeah, in season 2. And I think a lot of that is just me. She played such a prominent role in the narrative of season 1 that, like, I wanted more of that, and I felt like a lot of what she did this season 2 was just filler.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a letdown, but I feel as though the other characters did such a great job, like the writers did such a great job developing the other characters in different ways that I'm not that disappointed with her anymore the more I think about it, because everything else filled out so well that the feelings I had about her just don't mean as much anymore.
I get that. Yeah. Nick, what about you? What did you think about season 2?
I'm pretty in line with your perspective, I think. Between this show and Preacher,
yeah,
which we talk about, like Alex said in Gone to Texas, I'm really starting to learn at this point in my life, when thinking about movies and TV and stuff critically, to only look at the text, only look at what's there, and try to remove your expectation or your prior dispositions you had, anything you wanted to see from it, which is tricky because you're obviously going to react to something based on who you are and what you think, and you are going to bring some measure of your personality into it no matter what. So trying to keep that more in mind with this season, I think that if I wasn't doing that, I probably would not have liked the season very much, because I really, really love season 1, and I think what season 1 is doing and the way in which it's structured and the way in which it is all executed and told to us it's perfect for me, and I really love it, and I think it's unique. And season 2 suffers from feeling a lot like Lost a lot of the time, which is something we've talked about a lot, and I think it feels that way in some of the characters that we encounter, and in the nature in which they're brought into and then dismissed from the show feels like Lost sometimes. The way plot points mysteriously just bubble up and are often shrouded in some sort of whodunit or why did it happen kind of mystery.
Yeah.
I think that people like to call that the puzzle box kind of thing.
Yep.
Something like that anyway. A shade of that. And in the way that some of the answers which we've been wanting to learn are revealed, and then answers we didn't want nor need are also just thrown at us, feels a little bit like Lost in some of its weaker seasons. But it does have a lot of the strengths that Lost does too. But as far as another season of Westworld, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's not what I wanted from it, but it still is good. It still has a lot of merit. It still has a lot of value. It did push the show into directions that I kind of thought it would go, but faster than I thought it would go.
Yeah.
And I was reading other people's thoughts on Reddit, which is often a mistake, but it wasn't for this episode actually, because somebody kind of described how I was feeling and I just couldn't articulate it yet. That basically they really missed the drama of season 1. Yes. There was action in season 1, but season 1 was very dramatic, and there was a lot of inter-character drama, and there was a lot of you as a viewer would essentially be a guest, right? So you are seeing Westworld functioning as it was intended for the most part, and you're able to bounce really cool philosophical ideas off of Westworld because of that structure of it. Watching this park function the way that it was designed to made you think about a lot of things. And in season 2, it's chaos. And so you're not necessarily able to as thoroughly explore those ideas. I think you have to make quicker judgments about how you feel about certain things because you're just placed in these like life or death trigger pull situations, and you have to immediately make a judgment like, oh, I would side with that person or I would side with this one, instead of letting it breathe and letting you really look at how certain characters are reacting to things and being able to kind of collect the evidence and put yourself in that position and think how you would react. And season 2 is much more like a hostage situation the entire time, and you just have to make decisions and then like live with it, essentially. And so it is its own kind of intense because you're moving through all this action and these people getting killed and these people getting into these gunfights and stuff, and all of the big set pieces which we did have. A lot of them come off as kind of goofy because I feel like the show can do better, and the show can make me question things and make me feel like the stakes are incredible without as much bombastic action going on, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. No, and I think this is I don't know if you guys had any preference to start with what we didn't like or what we did like, but I feel like it might be good to segue into what we didn't like, and then we can hopefully end on a more positive note.
Sure, yeah, whatever.
I think a lot of what you were saying, Nick, at least what I recognized about the season, is that it largely felt as though character work was sacrificed for larger plot.
I would agree for the most part, except the character work was often shoved into like 3 characters.
Yes.
Like there was a small handful of characters
yes.
that got most of the attention, and then the other ones that also needed arcs or had arcs often felt weird or incomplete or rushed because they didn't get any attention earlier.
And well, but like kind of my main thinking of it is someone like Dolores and Bernard. Bernard kind of, and those are the 2 characters who we walk away with at the end of this season. And I feel like Dolores gets this weird, like she's one note through most of the season, and I hate the fact that we were still questioning whether or not she was truly conscious. I don't think there should have been any question there. I don't think that was a mystery they wanted to have. I don't think that was something that they wanted us to wonder about. But we were left doing so because everyone was like, well, she's on her Wyatt programming, or she's just full rampage mode. Like there should have been more shades of gray to Dolores. And more like decision making that we can see her making.
But that's the thing, is she's not fully Dolores again. Like I'm gonna fall back on that Wyatt code thing that you just said, because I think that is the key, is she's running code.
I don't think so though.
But I do, because I'll go back to my speculation for the end of episode 10. There was that I think in Charloris is the Wyatt code, and her whole purpose was to get out of the park so she could create a clean copy of Dolores in order to conquer the world or whatever. But I think the whole idea was that the Wyatt code's programming was to get Dolores out of the park. Like that was the sole purpose of that program, was to set everything in motion to get her out of the park and start everything else that needs to happen. And maybe that's wrong. I don't know.
No, like I don't see that as like an implausible reasoning behind that type of thing. But the fact of the matter is, in my opinion, there's nothing in the show that is giving us that text to chew on. Like that's a good headcanon. I've thought this through. This is what I think would make sense.
But that's the thing, is that's what I think this show kind of wants its viewers to have, is the ability to think these things through. And when you're like you guys are saying, like you're presented with a lot of this action and not so much character, and I feel like that's part of the issue with like you don't really think these things through because you're looking at all the surface, everything on the surface. So you're seeing all this action and stuff play out, and you're not thinking about what's happening underneath it. And that's why a lot of people, I think, had issues with this season, is that they didn't. A lot of what happened in season 1 was very mysterious, and people had to dig for it. And I feel like a lot of what happened in season 2, there was a lot on the surface to the point where people didn't feel the need to look for it. But then when they had to go look for it, they were disappointed that they actually had to look for it. It was. Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
I think you're making sense, but I don't know that necessarily connects with what I'm saying. Like, I don't think the idea that Dolores gets through the season and is not conscious, to me, is not particularly compelling. Like, we're supposed to see her get to the end of the season or whatever. I guess it would be maybe halfway through the timeline, and I'm not sure, but I don't know at this point. No, it's when she's Charloris and she's like, I've changed my mind. I want to preserve the digital Eden. Why did she do that? Like, that was a choice that she made because hosts are able to change. But yet we see her through this entire season, like, living through her quote-unquote loop of, like, I need to kill everyone to get to...
But I'm sure... I'm not sure, because I don't... What the hell do I know? I don't write the show, but I feel as though that is something that will be presented in Season 3 as, like, that'll be one of the first things Bernard and Dolores have a conversation about is, why did you choose to keep them around? Like, I thought you were going to get rid of them and you chose to keep them. Like, that seems like the sort of thing that they will explain down the line. But right now, on the surface, what they were trying to show is that hosts have the ability to change their minds and, like, have choice. And she did that without having to explain herself. But now she's going to have to answer for that later.
Maybe that's the case, but I got the impression that the digital Eden is gone and we will never hear or think about it ever again.
You may not ever see it, but that doesn't mean it's not going to be a topic of conversation between characters further down the line.
That's true. And I guess, Nick, did you have any thoughts on? So you said they stuffed a lot of the character work into a few characters. Those characters being, I think, Maeve, kind of the Man in Black.
Yep. But I hesitate to say Bernard also, because he kind of does, but he kind of doesn't. He gets time. He gets tons of time and attention, but he doesn't really develop too much until near the end of the season. And I was actually really satisfied with that. Bernard is a character that we spent the majority of season 1 with, felt like, so that was okay. But you rope in, and I was pretty okay with most of Maeve too. It just was strange because she kind of ends the season in a well, she's dead, but she kind of ends it in a place that I feel like people who are watching the show and wrestling with whether or not these hosts are conscious or capable of being conscious and can they really change, are also struggling with. Actually, I know someone I spoke with in person was struggling with Maeve's inability to recognize her daughter as artificial. Essentially, the fact that she could not say, this is manufactured and I don't actually love this person. This relationship isn't real. And the excuse me, person I was talking to was of the opinion that she should be able to immediately disregard all of that. Say, I don't need to go save her because she's not real. She's not actually my daughter. Why would I put myself on the line, especially with all this newfound power and potential that I have to go try to save this other host that, isn't actually related to me in any way.
Yeah.
And I am of the opposing viewpoint where I think what makes the hosts human-like is their irrational decisions like that. Like that's something
maybe even greater than human.
Yes, because a human mother would do that.
Yeah.
Like that's the power of.
And I heard something that they brought up earlier in the season on Decoding Westworld. I think someone wrote into them about the fact that, like, Maeve's situation reminded them of the idea of an adoptive mother being less worth than a biological mother kind of thing.
That's perfect. Example.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like the idea that because you're an adopted child, that parent isn't as meaningful as a biological parent is bullshit, in my opinion. And so I think it's Maeve's ability to see that, like, yes, this was manufactured, but it's a thing that I feel, and it is what I care about. I think.
And what is the point of existing if you are going to base that existence around pure logic and say, like, is this a bad idea, and not actually care about anything you care about, not pursue anything that is going to make life worth living? I mean, the fact that this whole thing seemed to bypass a lot of people bothered me, because I thought if you're not relating to Maeve on that level, then what are you even getting out of the show?
Are you a sociopath?
Well, no, not even that. But like, why are you watching the show? Like,
Yeah.
if you think every character is making, if any decision based on emotion by human or host is the wrong decision, then what fun are you having watching? Because the show will be no fun without trying to get out of it. Like, why is any of this worth fighting for? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Why do these robots care?
Right.
Well, and I think
why should I care about them?
Why do these robots not realize they're robots and therefore are inferior to us?
But while I think that sometimes viewers approaching it with that angle, while that might be sort of their fault or just who they are, I think that the fact that exists, it might be a slight defect in the show too.
Yeah.
Maybe. But it might be, I think part of it is the responsibility of the viewer to actually
ask those
do
questions.
what John is describing essentially, and instead of just accepting it, the action, just like watching it and then going, okay, cool, next scene, like actually think about what's going on. Like think about what's being presented to you.
I mean, that's the meta of the show, is like you're literally like you're just a programmed human going through a loop watching a TV show, and you don't actually think about it and make the decision to like dig deeper.
Yeah, and I think the most brilliant thing this season did, which the highs in this season were really high and the lows are very low, and one of the most amazing things that the series has done and was in the end of this season was when Bernard basically describes humans as they're just living the best they can according to their code, essentially. And the notion that hosts can actually make a decision to change and actually change and become better, and humans will always default to whatever
their biological programming.
Yes. Such an amazing notion, and if you can watch the show and accept that as not, fact, but carry it into your life with you and watch how people react and how people perform certain things and why people do what they do. If you can carry that in the back of your mind and try to use it to improve your own self, I think that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I was going to touch on the Maeve thing again real quick, that I feel as though Maeve making that conscious, quote unquote, decision to go after her daughter mirrors like the world that they're in Westworld at that time is clearly one where like people are more interested in themselves and just very selfish, self-interest like point of view. And I think that's what differentiates the hosts from the humans, is she's showing that she cares more about something else,
something external to her than just her own.
And that's the big difference there. And that may be like again, some of these people watching the show just don't quite get because they're too sucked into their own world.
Whereas like Sizemore is like trying to share the best bits of himself through his writing in literally every facet of the park that he has control over. I guess.
He's like the epitome of ego.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to sound like people watching this show are not smart enough to watch this show, much like our conversation about Radiohead last time. Like,
it's not. I don't think. It's hard for me to.
I am not a smart person. I want to throw that out there. I'm not a dumb person either, but like
none of us sitting at this table would be like, if you don't like this show, you must be stupid. Because that's not true.
No, not at all. I am stupid and I like this show. But what I'm trying to say about it is, it's again, like I feel like the show is playing us as viewers to break us out of the loop of just fucking watching TV and being okay with everything we see.
Yeah.
Like I feel like there's more to it than that. And I mean, I feel that way about a lot of shows. I mean, look at not stupid, but The Office, for instance. I've been rewatching The Office. This is like the 5th time I've watched The Office, the whole series front to back. And I still go online and I look up videos of like little shit people put in the background of The Office. Like just the little clues and things. The whole theory of Toby being the strangler. Like that, those little things, like I dig deeper because I find that interesting. And that's not saying that people who don't dig deeper aren't going to find interesting things appealing about Westworld. But it's just, if you're not inspired by it, then what are you? Like, what is it doing for you if you're not compelled to like think about it or discuss it or look up more information? Like, why are you even? is it just background noise? Then why are you even listening to our podcast?
Well, and that's the thing. I think there's literally you're speaking to literally no one who listens to this, because
I know,
anybody downloading
that's
an
true.
hour-long
like
podcast,
clearly you are compelled to like discuss it, or at least listen to people who you want to discuss it, whether they're as dumb as me or not. Like it's just I find it really interesting, like the way people think about television now. I suppose it's beyond just Westworld. It's TV in general.
Yeah,
we're all just robots in our own right.
It is interesting to try to strike the right balance and find the right diet. Like, you can't only watch TV that's really deep and heady and stuff that's gonna like cut to your emotional core, and then you need to like balance it with something that is lighter.
Yeah, it's like an episode of Westworld and then an episode of 2.5 Men. You know, you got to take one with the other.
Listen, you
God,
don't have.
why would you ever? 2.5
No one
Men?
has to eat fast
You
food.
could have picked something better than that.
I was joking.
I don't think you are.
No offense to anybody that likes 2.5 Men.
Oh,
but
full offense here.
Yeah, think about your life.
Dear God.
No, this is something that we have a friend of our old show that hosts a podcast called Films of Every Color, which was entirely based around the notion that I forgot exactly what he said at the top of every episode. It was like a proper cinematic diet is broad and varied, I think is what he always said. And when I was listening to that show, I loved it, because I was like, I've literally, I mean, I will watch almost anything and give it a shot. But I've never thought about it that way, and it's true though. Like your mind is sort of its own muscle, sort of its own. It needs to relax and it needs to work, and you can't just let it atrophy, but you can't just always be working it all the time.
Out.
Yeah, exactly. You need to kind of have a little bit of everything to keep all of your mind stimulated and make you recognize, like, there are good movies of all genres, and there's good television of pretty much every. There's great sitcoms, and there's great single camera comedies, and there's great dramas, and there's great, Western, horror, sci-fi, whatever. There's always good stuff out there. And I don't even know where I'm going with this anymore. We're just talking about basically like how it would be okay. Like, I wouldn't tell somebody that they're watching Westworld wrong if they're just watching it and saying like, yeah, that's neat. They're robots. But there is so much more to be gotten out of it. And it's weird when I've had conversations with people that are like, yeah, it's a neat show, but they don't want to talk about it anymore, and they don't want to think about what it means to humankind, like today in like 2018. Yeah. Why is this show coming out now, and why should you be watching it, and what is it saying about our current time? It's like, I just started watching The Handmaid's Tale. I'm like, this is a show that without question came out at the time it did for a reason. When you're watching it, you're just like, this is unmistakable. And I think it's important to often look at media and stories and see why they're being told when they are. Yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing that I wanted to bring up on what didn't work with me this season, I really only had two major bullet points. I think
not enough Shogun World.
Yeah, there's not. It should have been all Shogun World. No.
That would have been a bold move if this entire season was in another park. Wow.
That'd be beautiful.
I might have actually thought it was kind of awesome.
I don't think in any Jonathan Nolan written or Christopher Nolan directed project that involves some type of non-linear storytelling, it serves a purpose.
Yep.
And whether that purpose is to put you in the shoes of someone in the movie, a la Memento, or it is to reveal magic to you, a la The Prestige, or maybe even Westworld Season 1, some might say, I do not currently see what the point of this non-linear storytelling was in Season 2 of Westworld. Season 1, it was a reveal. It wasn't Dunkirk where the title comes up and it says 1 day, 1 week, it was not that 1 hour. They didn't show us that. It was literally, we're going to play these scenes in front of your face, and then we're going to tell you later that some of them were not at the same time as the others.
Yep.
And that was an interesting magic trick, and I think it was an interesting... It gave you more depth to who William was as a character, and it gave you information about what the park was like 30 years earlier than what you were seeing it later on. in the end, it meant something. But at the end of this season, I feel as though it was strictly just an obfuscation of what was going on and a way to make you work harder.
Yes.
They were trying to bootstrap consciousness into the people watching the show.
But I also think, well, I mean, I agree with you. I think this whole season could have done itself a favor if it just played out chronologically. I think that would have held everyone's interest a little bit better, and I would have less of my friends telling me that it's bad storytelling. I think, and I think that's why specifically, I want to say maybe it was the episode 4, the Delos episode, and the Akichida episodes were the most chronological.
Yeah, and
I think that's why those worked really well, especially because it was chronological over like a span of like 30 years.
Yeah, for
both of them, and I think that's. That lent itself to making those episodes be the best episodes of the season, hands down, in my opinion, obviously. But I do, and that's why I've been saying it since day one. I wish somebody would just supercut both seasons and give me the whole 2 seasons worth of Westworld in full chronological order, so that I can like start at the beginning and watch it evolve over time. You're not seeing an evolution. We're like, it's like. It just makes me think of like Tyler Durden splicing in porn clips into like, other movies. Like you're just cutting things and putting them here to like startle people or to like make them think differently, and it's not really working. So it would have been better to just see the whole story play out like in its normal timeline.
Yeah. Nick, what are your thoughts as the Nolan fan that I know you are, and I mostly feel like I am right there with you in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
How did you feel about the nonlinear storytelling this season?
I am unfortunately going to disagree with both of you.
That's okay.
But only to a certain degree. I remember reading that Christopher Nolan said, obviously there is a way to watch Memento chronologically.
Yeah.
It's in the special features. You got to fight through menus to get to it, but you can do it. And he was like, yes, you can do it. And it is very boring.
Yeah.
It's not a good movie. It's not a bad movie. It's not fun to watch because the story was written with that structure in mind. That is the way the story's meant to be told. I think if you watched a supercut of Westworld totally chronologically from start to finish,
the whole
season 1 and 2
of Dolores would be boring as shit.
I think almost all of it would be really boring. It would be, some of it might work really well, but I think on the whole you'd be like, ooh, like you could see why they do what they do in both seasons. However, I do agree with you that I think season 2's is not done as well as season 1's.
Yeah, and that is mostly my point. I'm not saying this whole story should be told straightforward. I think season 1 was great. I just think in season 2, it wasn't done. I can't see any like glaringly obvious signs of like we enhanced these storylines by not showing you.
I think that in the finale, everything regarding Bernard and what he's doing and his conversations with Ford, everything with Ford would not have worked as well had it been chronologically. But I know why they did it. They do it to hide that Dolores reveal, basically. Yeah. They don't want you to understand that there's someone else in Hale. They might want you to suspect that something is not right, which I think we all do. But we all do because of the way season 1 is. And this reflects my biggest problem with the series now, and my biggest worry for season 3 is that the writing feels like it might be caught in this sort of like loop, this like feedback loop of like, oh, let's see what they liked. What did they love about season 1? What did everyone respond to? Okay, let's put that in season 2. Let's duplicate that in season 2. And it's just the way the culture is now for movie and TV watching, because everyone takes to Reddit now. I mean, we're at the point now, like I remember like 5 maybe more years ago when Reddit was like a thing that like we did and like people went to heavily, but it wasn't like this thing. Like I would describe Reddit. I'd use Reddit as a verb, and people would be like, "What's that?"
Yeah.
And now like NBC is like saying user so and so on Reddit posted.
It's now like a social network.
It is. Yeah. It's like Google too. Like people use it like crazy, and now everyone goes to Reddit to talk about this kind of stuff now. And I feel like the writers and creators and staff of the show can't help but look at what people are talking about. And when I watch season 1 of Westworld, I feel like here's something that these people wrote. They took their time on. They could have had this idea. They might have been collaborating for years and saying, like, here's what we want to talk about. Here's what we want to do. Here's what we want to say. And season 1 feels like this really unique voice. And now season 2, I'm I have no confirmation and no way of knowing for sure, but it feels a lot like
they weren't in a vacuum chamber when they made it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And what people liked and didn't like about season 1 is reflected somewhat in season 2. And I think that while that's not bad per se to continue to make things that people enjoy, when you start letting viewers dictate what worked and what didn't, and that influences what you're making, then the product is distilled in some way, and it's not what you originally.
It's becoming less of your vision and more of a.
Yes, and I think season 3 is poised to be potentially the coolest season of this series, but it also could be the worst if they just continue like taking in what people do and don't like, and using that feedback to sculpt where the story's going. I mean, it might be good, but ultimately it's just I don't care. I don't care what everyone has to say about the series. I care about what the authors want to continue to do with it.
Yeah.
And I can't help, and I could be completely wrong, obviously, but I can't help but feel like a lot of stuff that happened in season 2 was a result of what was received well in season 1. And the idea of having another reveal and, oh, so-and-so is not who you thought they were, they're in fact someone else, feels like a carryover from season 1 in a way. And there's a lot about it that's really cool. There's a lot that makes me go, oh, well, that's neat. I didn't even think for a second, but I don't care the same way I did in season 1 because it's just like I've kind of already seen that trick from this team before. And although it is slightly different, it's not the same thing, obviously. It still just feels like, okay, is every season now going to build towards some reveal of someone is someone else? Like, I mean, William and the Man in Black being the same person, that's just a passage of time. That's human. This is somebody else, someone in someone else's body. And it also, unfortunately, as cool as it was, introduces the mechanic of all bets are off.
Anybody you see can be anybody
with
else.
With every single character. And that is a tried and true trope of a lot of sci-fi. We see that where like, oh, these, there's always a mechanic for somebody to not be who you think they are or to come back from the dead, essentially. And as soon as you introduce that, the dramatic stakes are immediately like a lot lower for me. Like I will go into season 2 just kind of being like, I mean, they probably have another version of all that machinery in Arnold's house that they can use to just continue working on. Like there needs to be some sort of complete disruption of the ability to do that for me to start to be like, okay, this matters again. But at the end of the day, as soon as you introduce a mechanic like that, who's to say you can't just later write in, oh, but there was another machine in, Wyoming that no one knew about. You know what I mean? Like you bring in these kind of things that can undo death and that you can reprogram somebody. Like it worked so well for a while, but eventually we reach this point now where it's almost like death doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And identity doesn't matter.
At the same time, I think that presents them with interesting challenges to try and make a compelling story in season 3.
Yeah, that's true.
It may not be possible.
Well, that's what I hope they focus on then is like instead of focusing on like the likes and dislikes of what people on Reddit have said, I think actually looking into the discussions that have been created because of what they've presented would be a better focus for them in terms of creating content for season 3.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I mean,
just even our discussions that we've had, like I feel like especially specifically the one where the big one that you had at the very end of like episode 8, I think.
Yeah.
I feel like those sort of discussions are the things that they should be feeding off of more so, just because it's more interesting and those are the things people are actually thinking about. And I mean, they're the most interesting thing to read on Reddit too when you really get into it.
And in a way, like as Nick said at the start of this podcast, they pushed into the James Delos stuff a lot sooner and faster than I anticipated this supposed 5-6 season show would do. And so I think they're open to doing that. I think, and this is leaking into what I think worked this season. I think the big ideas of this season worked really well.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really well. But we can come back to that. Was there anything else you guys didn't like here? Was there anything that sticks out in your mind as like I wish it would have happened differently? I wish it didn't happen at all.
I really wish they would have just shown me William's fucking bionic arms. I just want to see, just show me a glint of metal under the flesh. That's just something,
They should have even just given it to you in that in that end of the episode.
Yeah, like have him like tear his sleeves off and he's Jax, like I said last time. Like,
I forgot.
I think you, Alex. I think you said he like flexes and it like rips or something like that. Like,
rips right off.
Yeah,
it reminds me of this gag. Have you ever seen the Leslie Nielsen movie Spy Hard?
Yeah.
Do you remember the beginning when he's holding the woman over the cliff and he's like, hold on, and then like his sleeve just rips and he's got this humongous muscly arm.
It's like Arnold Schwarzenegger's arm.
And it's Leslie Nielsen like looking over the cliff and he catches this woman and the sleeve tears and it's just this like
it's clearly not really Leslie Nielsen's
amazing.
arm.
Yeah, it's so funny. That movie stinks, but that joke is really good. It's like right at the beginning. That's what I keep thinking of. So there's your deep movie reference for the day, deep cut. I think most of the Emily stuff didn't really work for me, actually. Like not the uncertainty of it all, and again the fact that I felt like I was wasting my time trying to figure out if she was a host or not. And I was like, these aren't the kind of questions I want to be thinking about. These aren't the kind of mysteries I want to be left with. Like, well, is she or isn't she? Is he? Isn't he? That one's more compelling because his whole existence is wrapped up in the idea of not letting a system tell him who he is. As he says.
That serves a function in stories and things like Blade Runner, where literally the first Blade Runner, you're like, I need to find 5 replicants. Where are they?
Yeah.
Are you a replicant or are you not? Are you
Yes.
the one I'm looking for or are you not?
Yeah, with the larger backdrop of like what does it mean to even be human, essentially? Like what makes them different from us, really, aside from the 4-year expiration date.
Is that a parody Dr. Seuss book? Are you my mommy? Are you my replicant?
Yes, absolutely.
Dr. Seuss Blade Runner would be amazing.
I'll get to writing that right
really
away.
Good.
But in terms of like Westworld, I think the larger exploration of like what separates us, what separates these species or whatever you would like to call them, is interesting. But it doesn't like the idea of like the removal of stakes of nobody can die and the idea that like Dolores theoretically has total recall and therefore can code any of the humans whose books that she read while she was inside, like all of that potential is in there. They did destroy the forge, or maybe I don't know. Did they? Who knows? But
yeah, I think the thing that we all have to become comfortable with is this show leaping into a new show every season.
Yeah,
like it's not going to remain as incredible as a Westworld via like Deadwood. I almost said Dead World. Deadwood style, where like
that's the 5th world actually of the 6.
That would be
well, amazing. Yeah. So like the first season was very country western, and season 2 is very like modern sci-fi ish.
I thought you were going musical genres for a second. I was like, season 1's country western. What's season 2?
Season 2 is progressive.
Prog rock.
Season 3 is retro wave.
Now you're speaking my language. I think that if the series had continued to remain in Westworld and the park hadn't devolved quite so quickly, if like the end of season 1 had happened at the end of season 2, for example, and we'd had like 2 seasons of like long drama of characters interacting within the park and like humans spending time in the park for like a season and leaving the park questioning like, well, what does any of it mean now? That would have been a great show. And I think every fan of Westworld season 1 would have loved that show. And that's not what Westworld became, though. And season 2 went into this. It just continued on this trajectory that none of us really saw coming because we didn't have enough data to really make a trajectory. And I think that was the problem for a lot of people, was being able to receive the direction it was going in and enjoy it. And I think something that we all covered at the top of the show is, this season may not have necessarily been what we wanted or what we expected, but we still liked it and liked a lot of it. And I think that the common trend I'm seeing online, which is the kind of thing that bothers me, is people just... I mean, I saw people I was reading people's comments on Reddit today, like calling season 2 like atrocious and saying it's a disaster and like a dumpster fire, which is such an annoying term, and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, no, it wasn't. You just didn't want it. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that it's bad. Like you need to look at it and really like try to take it in the grand scheme of things. Take season 1 and 2 together. Think about what it's saying about the world, because I think this show, like I said, was it's created for a reason in the time that it is.
I think that is that's a great question. The idea that like how much obligation does a show need to have to follow up a previous season to be like that season was, like does season 1 do the implications of season 1 and what it was have to inform what season 2 is. And I feel like in terms of like sitcoms and other HBO shows and other stuff like that, I feel like that's typically what it is. It's like we've spoken several times about how Game of Thrones is always like episode 9 is the pinnacle and episode 10 is where the falling action is. And they follow that through literally every season. But with something like Westworld, I have to credit the fact that they are ambitious enough to make a new television show every season.
Yeah, well,
so far.
Yeah, I agree. And like, I to go back, actually, John brought up a great point with The Office. I feel like every person who has watched The Office or is a fan of The Office feels one of two ways about the Jim-Pam relationship. You either like that it changed, that you either like the show beyond them actually becoming a couple, or you think that's where the show stopped being good.
Yeah.
Because then the show started changing. Because at the end of that, I think it's the end of season 3 when they like sort of couple up, or like the beginning of season 4, the show starts to change. Like all the characters' relationships start to change, and these characters all start to change, and they start to evolve both within themselves, but also with how they interact with each other. And I'm kind of one of the people that thinks it gets worse. Like I think that one of the things that made that show so good was the will they won't they kind of tension that continued through the first like 2-3 years. And then as soon as that tension is like relieved and you don't have that anymore, you have to start thinking like, okay, now what challenges do they have? Oh, now they have to worry about getting married, they have to be parents, and these aren't fun things to watch anymore. These are real things. And so people stopped having fun with the show, but I don't want to say more people, but other people started liking that aspect. They said now these characters feel more like real people. It both like makes the characters deeper, but also makes them more like real people. It's a weird dynamic, and a lot of people got a lot of value out of watching those characters grow. And if you watch like the finale of that series, all these characters are like almost 8-9 years older than they were when they started, and that can be really refreshing and really exciting, or that can also be horrible because you want them to remain in this bubble of like, oh, those characters were always this way and they were never going to change.
Yeah.
And Westworld is never going to be that. Like
No.
This show is driving forward no matter what, and you're either along for the ride or you're not. And that is the ambition, as you described, is pretty commendable.
Yeah, absolutely. I would take an unsatisfying, ambitious season of Westworld over like a safe season of literally any other TV show that I could think of. Like, I think pushing for more and achieving some of it and failing at other parts of it, I think, is better, because overall you take those lessons you learn from it and you hopefully make something better the next time around.
Well, I think we're at a point now in culture where we finally are okay with existing with media that will always be around. Because when movies, you used to have to go see it in the theater, and if you didn't, it was gone, and you hope that they would show it again a few years later. But like when a movie came out, like you had to get to it, because home video wasn't a thing yet.
Yeah.
And then home video came out, and suddenly we had it more at our disposal, and people of our generation got really used to the idea that we would always be able to go back anytime we wanted and put in that tape, and there where those characters would be, they wouldn't have changed. They're the exact same. It's always going to be the way we remember. And I think a lot of people roughly our age have carried that into our adulthood, where we expect that from everything. We expect it to stay the way we remembered it.
Well, and that's the downfall of the Star Wars series and Jurassic
Took the
Park.
words right out of my mouth. That's where I was going.
And like,
but now we're at the point where there are people younger than us that are still of age now, and they are more okay with this idea that characters, they're more embracing of characters continuing to change. I think
Characters are welcome.
Yeah, and God, I gotta go.
I'm sorry.
That was your most dad joke you've had a long time. Completely derailed my train of thought.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I think that we're getting comfortable again with characters aging. Some of us are, and some of us aren't. And like John said, Star Wars is the best example. Some people are really okay with where those old characters have wound up, and they actually have grown, myself included. I didn't at first. I was met with hostility by me, but the more I watched stuff, more I watched episode 7 and 8, I was like, you know what? This is what happens to people, though.
Yeah.
They don't stay the same.
Yep.
Things happen to them. They change. And if you can accept that about characters, A, you can accept it about yourself. Like, aging will not be a shock to anybody anymore. But B, you'll enjoy those stories so much more, because a story can, I mean, in the case of like a one and done movie, like you'll see, I just rewatched Inception last week, and I was like, God, this movie it's incredible. Like I still love it so much. And I think like, man, wouldn't it be cool if there was another one, or like you got to see more with those characters?
Yeah.
And I thought, no, because this is it. This is the story you're presented with these particular characters. This is the only time of their lives you get to see them. And if it did become a franchise, you would have to accept that inevitably they would all die. Like somebody would kill them. It might be the next week. They might be on a job and they might all die. Like then that's the tragedy of continuance, I guess, in stories.
Yeah.
And if you are going to have something that's episodic and that moves like this, you're going to have to accept that, most stories don't necessarily always end well. There's always going to be something bad.
Yeah,
that's gonna
you have to have
characters.
real stakes. Like
Exactly. And so, people who were not pleased with how this season went in a lot of the ways it did, like you have to really, I think, identify, was the fault of the show? Is the show really bad, or is it just something that you didn't necessarily want? I'm not saying one is wrong or right, but I think I'm glad that all three of us are, we didn't love certain things about the season, but some of it is a reflection on where we wanted it to go, and it didn't go in that direction.
Well, and I've heard a lot of discussion here about the fact that, like, this is a show. We are in the fortunate position of having a podcast about this show where we sit here and dissect these things and talk about it, and we read what other people think, and we do all of that footwork, all the legwork, everything that we need to do there to try and understand the thing that's put before us. But you got to assume that not all, however many million of HBO viewers that watch the show are not all going to download 2 different Westworld podcasts a week and troll around in the Reddit quick questions thread and that kind of stuff. And I wonder if the people who thought of this season as atrocious are just the ones that want nothing to do with any of that. And I think if that's how you want to watch television, you're going to hate Westworld, and that's not through any fault of your own, like, whatever. That's not what you're looking for out of TV.
I'd be curious to know what TV they do, like
2.5 Men. No. But I think it's a very interesting idea. The fact that, like, HBO's making a show where some people think it necessary to listen to 2 podcasts about it every week. Like, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And I think there's a place for that here. And if you don't like it, don't watch it. But at the same time, like, I don't know how you got through season. Are those the people who watched season 1 and didn't realize William was the Man in Black? Like, because I think those people exist.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know either. I didn't mean to spin our season recap into a
greater
against people
I think it's
on
great.
Reddit, but I think
it's great.
It's worth talking about at least.
So is there anything else that didn't work outright? Should we move on to things that did work?
I think it's really hard for me without rewatching it but I wouldn't want to like pinpoint a lot of little things that didn't work.
Yeah.
I do wish I got a clearer. The one line that haunted me throughout this entire season was when Bernard says, "I'm not really here with you, am I?" And we never got a clear answer of what he was referring to when that happened. I think we can kind of draw conclusions that he's been there prior by himself, and that's what he's remembering. But at the same time, like, she should have been gone from the shot or something. Like, I felt like something really significant was going to come out of that, and when it didn't, I was like, well, don't I feel like an idiot?
mean, most of those scenes could have just been him rebuilding his memory,
Maybe.
And, like, it's him discussing with his own internal monologue, like, I'm not really here with you, am I? Like, and it's him just kind of, like, because he jumbles his memory, So he's trying to remember exactly what happened. So most of those scenes we saw are just him replaying it in his head of, like, how those things went down.
And I think that's how it's supposed to be taken. Like, him saying, "I'm not really here with you, am I?" might be him standing in the mesa after Stubbs and Strand found him on the beach. Like,
and we're just watching him work his way through what is when.
I wonder if that
when is now.
I wonder if that presents itself better in like a more
rewatch.
binged
it
fashion.
Could. And then just in general, a lot of the little, I shouldn't say little, a lot of the big moments felt kind of rushed.
Yeah.
I felt like there was a lot of stuff that just in the last few episodes feels like it just starts happening.
Elsie dying and being the thing that helps Bernard change his thoughts on Dolores's mission, I think, is really interesting, but I hate the fact that she just got murdered and left on the floor in
Yeah, I felt like the conversation between her and Hale probably should have been a little bit longer than just like 4 sentences.
Yeah, and like they shouldn't have necessarily
That's
walked into a room and she died. It could have played out.
That's that
longer,
drama you're looking for.
Yeah,
you know, something like that, like them having this like heated argument and like it kind of exploding into Hale just shooting her and it being done. And walking away, and then it clips to Bernard up. Like that would be the thing is like you don't know he's up there at all. You see them argue, and then it, like, you know what I mean. Then it's revealed that he sees it, and he's just like, "Oh my god! Like, I need to do something about this." So
yeah. So all right.
Oh, I do want to say real quick. When they reveal that humans are just in a loop of sorts and following their own code, did that make any of you guys like think about how much your life is just a fucking cycle?
Oh yeah, well I mean
because I started waking up every morning at the same time again, and I'm just like, oh my god, like.
Well, Nolan and Joy were talking about the fact that like, oh, you know, they'd wake up, they'd take the kids to school, they'd go sit down in the coffee shop with their lunches and write out some of the season. They'd be like, we are absolutely just.
I wake up, I let the wiener dog outside, he comes back inside, and then I make him go back to bed for like 5 minutes. Then I get up, I shower, go about my day, and it's like rinse and repeat every day.
Go to Tubby's for lunch.
I was like, oh man, like what is this? Sucks.
Yeah, I mean we're definitely creatures of habit. I think in general, some people more than others. I think generally we need routine to keep us somewhat sane.
Yeah,
and I think that as adults,
the routine is making me insane.
I think as adults, it's part of the reason time starts moving faster for us too. As you just start, the days
blur together. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
not as sporadic. Life isn't as sporadic as it was, which is probably why sometimes the weekends feel like a little bit longer than they are, because you might, you shake up your routine.
You do things a little different.
Exactly. That's the kind of stuff I miss this show being about, is like these kind of questions and these kind of conversations.
Well, and so what worked well for me were those big ideas. James Delos.
Yeah.
Everything with James Delos is amazing. I like, with the exception of the hats, the idea of the park collecting the data, the cradle and the forge themselves, being able to like run simulations of hosts and humans, and the big question of like people are always following their biological programming, but not like hosts don't have to. They are not beholden to their programming.
They can deviate.
Yeah, all of those things are great and they're strong, and they could have been focused on more in some places, and I would have liked the season more for that, but I'm still thankful that they are the things that I continue to think about after the season is over.
Yeah.
Being a big sciencey kind of guy, that's the kind of stuff that I like to think about. But other stuff that worked well for me, I thought literally all of the music.
Oh yeah,
everything
for sure.
Ramin Djawadi touched this season was fantastic. They do have the season 2 soundtrack up on like Spotify and everything now. They have the piano only version of Heart Shaped Box that played during Aki's episode. And then they also have like one of the songs in that episode that comes after that pulls some of Heart Shaped Box into like the score. And it's incredible. Like it's just so good. And so I have to thank the show for giving me more of his work.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, all of the performances, some of the people that popped in for a little bit, like Celia Ward and Peter Mullen as James Delos, like everybody they pick in the show, maybe with the exception of Charlotte Hale, but I don't know. Even that, I think she did better this season than she did in season 1 in a lot of ways. It like everybody here seems to be in it, and they get it, and they know what they're doing, and on top of that, the effects works that they use to make the things like Delos erroring out in front of your eyes, and Abernathy, like anything with Abernathy, like I don't know if it's his acting or if it's digital effects or both. It's all awesome.
Yeah. All
of that stuff was fantastic. I did hear they did a Have either of you guys watched the Anatomy of a Scene that Vanity Fair does? They'll get like a director to come in and they'll play one of their scenes on like a tablet in front of them, and then they can like mark it up with like,
oh, that's cool.
It's almost like a football play kind of thing.
Yeah,
That's
like
sweet.
there's a 30-minute one with Nolan and Joy where she talks about directing Peter Mullen in those scenes in episode 4, and all the stuff that they reveal is fantastic, but they brought up the fact that they specifically took some of the vowel sounds out of Ed Harris's performance and inserted it into Jimmy Simpson's voice, his audio tracks, to make them sound more similar in that episode.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
Which is incredible. Like the amount of detail work that they go to helping recognize the fact that these two people who look extremely different right now, like it makes sense to me that Jimmy Simpson grows up to look like Ed Harris now, and if he doesn't, I'm going to be very disappointed. So,
stay tuned in 30 years, 35 years.
But anyway, and like I don't know. There's a lot that works about this season, and that's why I didn't necessarily want to get totally bogged down into what didn't work. I don't know if you guys had any other specific things that you really love. Samurai World.
Shogun World.
Sushi World.
Sushi World. I hope we get to spend a little more time there. Having Stubbs be still in the park makes me think we will, because I feel like they can't get rid of him, and like Stubb
is host.
Stubb is host.
We are Stubb.
I do want to make that shirt. I'm gonna like we are Stubb. I'm gonna make that happen somehow. I have ideas. I like, again, those singular episodes where it was the main focal point was like one or two characters,
yeah.
or would that just, I loved that. You know, the Akichida episode was incredible. The James Delos episode was really, really good too. And I think that's what made the Shogun World episodes work out too, is like they were very like singular focused on like that group of characters and what their mission was in trying to get through Shogun World alive.
Yeah.
I think those were definitely the strongest episodes.
I think Aki's episode, Kiksuya, is kind of the perfect embodiment of like what I want Westworld to be. The idea of like there are so many breadcrumbs that they left for themselves everywhere that they can start linking them together with things that have even greater meaning in a later season.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just kind of incredible. And so I'm excited to see if there is more stuff like that or if they continue to try and do that kind of thing. But
I like the fact that this season made me want to go back and watch season 1 in all seriousness.
That's what I will say, is that I do feel as though season 2 enhances season 1 in a lot of ways.
Wholeheartedly, especially the scenes where you're seeing Maeve almost get scalped by the Indians, by Ghost Nation, and you're like, they're trying to wake her ass up like big time, you know, like. I mean, you think they're trying to kill her. They're not. Like,
they want to scalp her to put the
the
maze underneath her head.
Things like
whatever,
that. There's a scene where like Akichida's homeboys like got her hair pulled back and he's holding a knife to her scalp, and it's like seeing scenes like that play out, or like in season 1 in the first like 5 minutes of season 1 when Dolores is talking to Teddy about how look at all these steer here, and that's the Judas steer, and that one there, it doesn't matter where he goes, but the rest of them are going to follow. Like. Things like that, like being able to pick up those little hints of things happening is just, it's fantastic to see that play out. And again, I mean, the conversation we had before we started recording about, you know, how William has essentially been labeled this virus that's destroyed the Delos family, but essentially he's a virus they created, and nobody seemed to really think about that in a lot of the discussions online. Like,
I guess I don't know. I don't want to say created, but like incubated or like
right. Well, again, like Nick, you brought up the fact that he says like I've always had this stain in me, like it's always been there, and it very well may have been. Wow. Oh man, I'm so hungover. But the fact of the matter is, like, if it weren't for the Delos family, like, poking and prodding at him and testing him and his limits and trying to like figure out what kind of meat he's made of, he wouldn't be this virus that destroyed them, and it's probably their poking and prodding that made him want to destroy them to begin with.
Yeah.
So
Logan might have
things
pushed
like
him
that. Just
past
the
brink.
way season 2 made me question the things I've seen previously is just something like I think is really well done, and I hope season 3 does the same.
Yeah. There's beautiful writing throughout, as we were talking about Maeve getting scalped in season 1. The line that Ake has of "I wanted to help you, I wanted to warn you, but in this world it's easy to misunderstand intentions."
Mm-hmm.
That's some fantastic stuff, and the fact that it like comes from all directions, like literally everybody has several lines that are just fantastic. So, Nick, any other stuff that sticks out that you were glad was here or that worked for you really well?
I really liked everything with Logan in this season.
Yeah,
It worked really well for me, and that was an answer that I didn't know I wanted, but I did. Like how I didn't think we'd see any more of him.
Yeah.
And the fact that he played such a big role in the season was really awesome, both like in William's story, in James Delos' story, in Akechida's story, with being sort of the representation of the Forge. I thought that was pretty cool. I think Ben Barnes is pretty awesome in this series. I think he's probably done now. I don't think we're going to get any more of him, and I'd be really satisfied with that. But if he comes back as some new host, I think he's such an engaging actor in the role that it would be fun to watch him do something else in this same series.
Yeah.
The Akechi episode was really phenomenal. It was not something I expected to. That blindsided me. That was the new big mystery, the new big kind of surprise for me, but it worked so well. And I think having an episode that was focused on him, first of all, but also like an episode almost entirely about one character and what they've been up to was just incredible and made me want to continue to, we've said a few times, got to go back and watch it all now.
Yep.
Had another whole week's worth of just straight Westworld rewatch to do. The Return of Ford, phenomenal. Like the way it was executed was so cool. I'm sad that the cradle is gone because I think that the potential for what was going on in the cradle is just the coolest. I think that was one of the coolest mechanics they introduced, and the fact that they did away with it so quickly is their prerogative, I guess. It's kind of a shame because it'd be fun to see what else could be done with it, but I understand why it couldn't continue to exist necessarily.
Yeah.
But that idea of, a separate reality within this sort of already separate reality where you can do a lot more and where time can move differently for you is such an incredible resource. And that's the kind of thing that I think Nolan's also do really well with. So, speaking of my Inception rewatch, kind of jarred that in my memory.
Well, and I think they're kind of on the brink of maybe heading towards that question or discussion of is reality really reality? There's been a lot of scientific exploration and philosophical pontification about the idea that we are not living in reality. We are just another simulation in some computer somewhere in the world above us. To see Westworld start going that way and tackling those questions as well.
Where can I put in cheat codes?
I don't know. Don't know yet.
Only users can.
But what if season 5 was about Dolores realizing that the real world she's in is not the real world, and she is the vector that Ford created 4 simulations down to go and take over the real world for.
Well, now you've just ruined the show.
That kind of that would be an interesting.
Doesn't this just make you want another Tron movie?
Tron. At this point, I think I'm ready to revisit The Matrix, honestly. I would be okay to see somebody doing more with The Matrix.
Interesting.
Because that was kind of the birth of that in my brain.
I never liked the aesthetic of The Matrix very much. So that
the green.
Not even the green, just the...
Oh, the leathery,
Yeah.
It was very late 90s.
Yeah, and just the representation of the real world in that, I get it, but I'm I don't want to watch any more of that. The first Matrix is an incredible film, but the second and third, they've got their value somewhere. But overall, the more you got into the real world, the less I wanted to watch it, because I was this isn't cool. This isn't fun to watch. It's not thought provoking. It's just sad, and it makes me be just extinguish us so we don't have to worry about it anymore. It's just a drag.
Go back to your loops so you can.
I think
stop thinking about it.
the comparison though of this to Tron is pretty valid. I think. I mean I think that explored that idea pretty ahead of a lot of other, if not like most other movies. Like 82, the original came out. Yeah, that's pretty far ahead of its time. The fact that there's still themes from that kind of being borrowed, or not borrowed, but explored in other works.
Yeah,
is pretty awesome. I would love to get a Tron movie that was much more drama, but that'll definitely never happen, which is fine because they're great for what they are.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. All right.
There like you described this perfectly. All the big ideas worked really well. It's just the actual implementation of a lot of them was a little clunky.
Yeah.
I think that I did like the glimpse we got into the Raj. Like, as much as I didn't really love the Emily storyline, seeing the other parks was really cool.
Yes.
And I want to continue to see more of them. And I don't want to leave the park behind in season 3.
Well, let's talk about season 3 a little bit there.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to leave the park behind.
There's been some postulation going on, a lot of it by Joanna Robinson, her trying to connect some dots between things that HBO executives have said and some of the creative decisions made here in terms of things like Lee Sizemore needlessly dying. The idea that they could leave the park behind pretty easily after this episode, that kind of thing, meaning that like...
You can't, though.
They can.
They can't.
But they could.
Because we need to know what happens to Maeve.
Well...
Felix and Sylvester.
What if Maeve, Felix, and Sylvester get off of a train into New Shanghai, wherever the hell they are?
I also need to know what happens to Stubbs.
Maybe there are more
singular
Stubbs.
and plural.
But anyway, like... Season 2, I guess we can also wrap in the fact that like season 2 ratings dipped. Like they have been kind of falling week to week. They didn't get anywhere near season 1. I shouldn't say anywhere near, but they were lower than season 1 ratings consistently.
Yeah,
and HBO seems to be looking to downsize the budgets on a lot of their shows since Game of Thrones and Westworld have been pretty larger than life.
That's probably why they've moved to doing such limited series.
Yeah, well, I think so. But
like, what was the new ones? What Sharp Objects?
Sharp Objects starts tonight. Big Little Lies was last year, and even that season 2 is supposedly one of the ones that's pretty expensive as well because they're doing a second season of it for some reason. But anyway,
of Big Little Lies.
Yes, not that I mean I like the show and
I loved it.
I don't know that there needs to be a season 2.
I'm in for it.
Sure. I'll certainly watch it, and hopefully I am surprised, and I'm like, this is interesting, but we'll see.
Sharp Objects looks good, also.
It does. So yeah, season 3. I mean, what do you guys think? Is it John doesn't want the park to go away? Obviously,
no, I don't. And the more I think about it, because Dolores is the oldest host in the park at this point, what's stopping her from using her brain to recreate other hosts beyond the 5 pearls she took with her?
It's possible. It certainly is possible. They've left a lot.
That's one of the things I thought about. Like, how are they going to make all these other hosts? Like, is she going to make a host army of sorts, or like, what's the plan?
Yeah.
And I mean, same thing with Bernard. Like, what's he going to do? I mean, Bernard could probably just like. Well, Dolores knows. She knows where she put the forge and she knows where all that stuff is, but Bernard doesn't. Like, what's he gonna do?
I'm pretty interested to see how the Charles Xavier / Magneto dynamic plays out between them. If it really is that antagonistic, or if they try to make it more of a diplomatic, like we need to counterbalance each other.
Well, I want to know why William was being tested at the end.
I don't even know that that's a season 3 thing.
Right. I know that's further down the line, but I feel as though it's the sort of thing. It's very much a what do you want to call it?
Like an indicator of where they're
like the idea of like the Xavier Magneto thing again, and when they team up against like who do they team up against in the comics? I can't. My brain is fried right now.
Apocalypse.
Yeah, like something along those lines. Like William's going to be the bigger threat, because he is a virus.
He's the Agent Smith.
Yeah. Something along those lines. I don't know. We're just speculating. But I think season 3 is going to... I feel like it's going to spend a lot of time developing those three characters, Bernard and Dolores and William, like after the park. You know, like what the park did to him and how he's going to recover from that and what it's going to do to his mentality, which, again, he's already unhinged. We know he's like a psychopath. So how much further down that rabbit hole can he go?
The idea of William and Dolores or Bernard meeting in the real world, like her unsuspectingly showing up somewhere in his life, I think that's pretty interesting. But I don't know, Nick, any thoughts on season 3? Where you want it to go, where you think it'll go?
I would really love some passage of time. I would love if it started 2 years later or something like that. Just throw us into the mix a couple years later, show us, what's changed.
That's probably what it'll do. It'll set out further ahead and then like backtrack.
You're probably not wrong.
To explain it.
I honestly, if they were like, hey, season 3 takes place 50 years after season 2, I'd be like, sweet. Like, I'm ready to just kind of leave a lot of this stuff behind and not let it dictate what's happening.
And that's just genius, is they would look the same because they're hosts.
Yeah.
Right.
That's so rad.
I think that'd be pretty cool. I mean, we'd be leaving behind like Felix and Sylvester and stuff, but I just don't care. Like that they're not main characters.
Would you? I mean, they could still come around too,
They'd be old.
They could be. Or they could have recreated themselves as
stupid.
hosts.
No, I wouldn't want that at all. I'd be like, they're not important enough characters.
No,
like,
I know.
For me to...
Like just Maeve's henchmen.
Yeah, exactly. And if they just like disappeared and like maybe like Maeve mentions them because I'm sure she will be back. Like I don't need to see a lot of this. I don't need to see how Maeve gets... Like I feel like we're left kind of with a few sure things that like, okay, she's probably going to come back, Hector, and then they'll probably come back. I'd rather just like... Okay, we're later and they're back. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like what are the to get into the real meat of like how is Dolores going to take the world?
Right. How are they even going to survive?
Yeah.
Like I think that's going to be what season 3 is largely about, is the survival of the species and less about like the global takeover.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is the story that I think could be really cool. And honestly, there's plenty of opportunity for HBO to trim the bottom line. I mean, make this a more grounded story and just make it more like season 1 was.
That's the idea of staying out of the park, is like they don't have to fly everybody out to Utah or wherever they shot most of the stuff out in the desert. They can stick around in more real world locations and not build a bunch of sets, and they won't necessarily be filming people on loops where they need to recreate the same scene hundreds of times and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and you don't need 50 extras to...
Yeah.
You don't need 300 extras to act, for that big finale there.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity to tell like a slightly smaller story, but equally as compelling.
Yeah. Yeah, I would like to see what Westworld means on a more...
outside of Westworld.
Well, yeah. What the show means outside of Westworld, I think it's an interesting frontier.
Honestly,
sure.
what I want, and this is just me, but I think it'd be really cool to spend a couple episodes in another park that we have yet to see, and some more new characters, and watch how what the domino effect of Westworld's implosion is on the other parks.
What if we go to what if we go to Roman World? Season 3 is all Roman World and like, I don't know, Crocodile Dundee World, and by the end of the season they make it out to find Dolores and Bernard have been out there for hundreds of years.
I'm in. Like that sounds cool. That sounds cool.
That would be pretty sweet.
Yeah. Crocodile Dundee World.
I don't know. I couldn't think. I was like, what other strange lands are there?
Yeah, that's a good
back
point.
Paul Hogan's world.
Hogan World. It's Paul Hogan and Hulk Hogan.
Oh man, and Hogan from the Warriors 3.
Oh yeah, there you go. I don't. What do you think the other parks are?
I don't know.
We've got 3. There's 6, right?
There are supposedly 6 total. Roman World, I think.
That's probably medieval. We don't have a medieval.
Roman and medieval world are potential contenders. For
Is there like a full-on sci-fi world, like space world?
They'll be able to save a lot of money in medieval world by just reusing Game of Thrones footage. So
yeah, just
turns
out that is medieval.
I
world?
think in future world there is a space world. There is like
Probably.
you go out to outer space, 0G space world type thing. Which sign me up. I will go tomorrow. Like I'm ready for that.
Tomorrow World.
No,
Well, that's too close to Tomorrowland.
Yep. We don't want to go there.
Sorry, Brad Bird.
Sorry, Brad. We love you. John Carter World, Disney World. Oh, it's just Disney World, isn't it?
Yeah. Yep. That's true.
Get it out.
All I'm getting when I search for future, it's because I put a space in there. Some stupid James Franco movie. No offense. Oh, you know what? I think, no. Anyway. Yeah, I don't know what the other places could be.
DuckTales.
DuckTales World?
DuckTales World.
Animated World?
I think they would do themselves a disservice by saying that there's more parks and not at least giving us a hint of what they are.
From interviews, it sounds like they were like, we wanted to leave those there for us to explore in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it. Dino World.
Yeah.
Whoa. Jurassic World.
Yep.
Honestly, I think Medieval World would be really cool to see.
They'll lose money though because they're gonna have to pay Chris Pratt.
Yeah, there have been people wanting Westeros World and the Game of Thrones.
That would be the
vein of
ultimate
things.
if the Game of Thrones finale revealed that it was all just a Westworld tie-in.
Simulation.
And none of it's real.
That'd be pretty good.
They were all hosts. Like it ends in Anthony Hopkins turning away from like an observation window and being like, "It's ready to open." And then he just flies away in his jetpack.
Oh.
Everyone freezes, and then
Yeah. Instead of hats, you all wear really bad wigs. I don't know what I'm talking about though, because I don't watch Game of Thrones. So.
That's okay. Yeah. No, I am excited. I'm still excited, despite overall being down on what season 2 ended up being. I am excited for more Westworld, regardless.
I mean, I get that people were down about season 2, but I'm not.
Yeah.
Even like I said, even my dislike for Dolores' story arc this season, I've just grown to like it at this point because I liked everything else.
I'm at a point where I feel like if I rewatch this in a year, I think a lot of my complaints might melt away now that I know what season 2 is.
Probably gonna rewatch it next week.
Well, yeah, but you know.
Stories have a way of doing that.
Yeah.
You watch it again, second viewing, and
The almighty second
swear
viewing.
by the second viewing.
Yep.
It reveals all.
Yep.
I don't know. The second time I saw Cloverfield, I thought it was terrible.
Did you like it the first time?
I did. I saw it in theaters.
Oh yeah, I saw it in theaters too, but I didn't love it.
I didn't like it the first time.
The first time I saw
and
it,
I haven't watched it since.
I saw it at the Chinese theater in L.A.
Mm.
It was pretty epic.
That's
a lot
cool.
of people got up because they got sick.
I could see that.
Yeah.
It's
Get
probably
good. They got to get good.
It's probably my favorite Cloverfield movie.
Of the 3 you've seen.
God, that third one.
Yeah.
It's something else. Have you watched it yet?
Nope.
Oh boy.
I have not wanted to spend the time on that.
I highly recommend everybody rewatch season 1.
Yeah.
If you have the time to do it, do it.
I'm definitely going to. I think after we're done with Preacher, I'll probably go back. I think I found some other new shows now that'll kind of keep me occupied. I'll finish The Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah.
I discovered that Home Improvement reruns are on almost
snap.
every weeknight.
Beautiful.
And I didn't know this until a couple days ago, and I was like, wow. Now there's a show that simultaneously did not change at all, and yet kind of did. Like as your cast ages, you kind of, especially when there's kids involved, you have to start evolving the storylines, which is pretty cool actually.
Yep.
But that is a perfect time capsule of a show. Like if you're around our age, you remember being young when that was like on. And
it was literally our family, so
yeah,
that's kind of what I always
yeah,
saw out of
so
it.
that's a fun one. Like it's fun to go back and watch other older sitcoms like Cheers and stuff like that, which carry their own nostalgia, but they're a little before our time.
Yeah.
Or a lot before our time, I guess. And they're fun to watch, and you can remember what that era was like or probably like. But then when you watch a show that you remember from like when you were young, and then you watch it kind of recontextualized as an adult, it can actually be really interesting.
That one's always interesting for me. Not apparently we're starting the Midwest Home Improvement Nerds podcast.
Honestly, it's probably the only it's probably the most
applicable
positive
TV show.
It's probably the most positive reflection of the Detroit area too ever in media. Like there are so many call outs to cities that no one else, like in the one that was on the other night, they talk about Saginaw, and I was like, see, no one would know what the hell
there was
that
one
is.
episode in like season 2 where they're like, oh, you want to go see a movie down at the Berkeley Theater? And I was like,
right, yeah.
that's pretty nuts.
They had one where they talked about Pontiac a few times too.
Yeah.
I think
It comes up a lot.
He's always wearing like Western Michigan sweatshirts and like all kinds of stuff
jackets.
like that. But the thing that's
name
interesting
something
to
else
me,
that's painted Detroit in such a positive light.
the thing that's interesting to me is watching the first season of that show and realize, like, to me, I was like, I didn't realize that the 90s ever felt like the 80s. But the carryover. The carryover between decades is something that is inherently interesting for me somehow, where it's like, it's not like 1989 feels like 1990, but like 1992 still looks like 1985 for some reason. And it's I don't know.
I think it usually takes, I think they say like 2 to 3 years into a decade for it to like remove the trappings of the prior decade.
Yeah, which is...
If you look at like a lot of the 3 years, like 53, 63, 73, 83, 93, that's when you'll start to see things like shift.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's crazy. But anyway.
We digress.
We certainly digress.
If you want to see the home improvement nerds.
Yeah, if you're interested in what would we call it?
How long would that take to watch? Oh my god.
It would be the Binford Files.
That's pretty good.
Binford Files. That sounds like a hard sci-fi spin-off of Home Improvement.
I gotta go buy that domain name right now.
The Binford Files, and the theme song would be a bit crushed version of the Home Improvement theme song.
That's pretty awesome.
And
we just play it backwards.
What would his grunt sound like backwards?
Ooh.
Yeah. It kind of sounds, it kind of does this, so it might sound the same actually.
TheBinfordFiles.com, only $12.99. Somebody go buy it for us. But anyway, I think that's it for this season of Westworld FM.
If our Patreon hits $65, we will buy the Binford Files and start a home improvement podcast.
It ran for 203 episodes.
Yep.
Shit.
So we could, if we did one episode per show, oh my god, I didn't want to think about it. It would take us like 4 years.
Yeah.
No, you could do, because you could probably, they're half-hour episodes, so you do two episodes per podcast episode.
Maybe.
Or one per, and they would just be short
podcasts. They had a few episodes that were like carryovers too, like to be continued ones, so you'd probably want to hit those at the same time.
All right.
Alex says this is enough.
We're going to end this. Once again, you can find more episodes of our podcast on westworld.fm. We're also on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Google Play Music. We're Westworld FM on Twitter, and you can email us at westworldfm@gmail.com to tell us what you think of our show and share your thoughts on HBO's Westworld so we can read them on our show. Yeah. The Midwest Podcast Network has several other shows about video games, horror movies, and more. Check out all of our shows at MidwestPodcastNetwork.com. Our theme music is the song Industrial Cinematic by Kevin MacLeod, and it is being used under an Attribution Creative Commons license. That's it for this season of Westworld FM. We are excited for the next season of Westworld, and our podcast will probably come out after that starts. But until then, may you rest and have a deep and dreamless slumber.